Sometimes when I know that I have to do something but I don't really want to do it, then I might start to feel a little disheartened and maybe even a little sad. And I think a simple example of this would be a chore, like, say, getting out of bed early and going to the gym instead of sleeping in. But another example that might hit closer to home for some people is the prospect of a relationship with somebody with whom you have great chemistry and you really want to make it work. But for one insurmountable obstacle or another, such as the fact that maybe there's too much distance between you guys, or you have different long-term goals that are just irreconcilable, really the best thing to do is to just part ways amicably and move on with your lives, which is, of course, much easier said than done. But the problem is, if you do let yourself be drawn in by those emotions of feeling disheartened and sad, then you're actually setting in motion some consequences that may not be immediately obvious, but you've set them in motion nevertheless, so they will manifest themselves eventually. So in this video, let's go ahead and take a look at, number one, the origin of those emotions in response to being faced with something you don't want to do. Number two, why it's wrong to be drawn in by them and give in to them. And finally, how you can respond instead to avoid falling victim to some of those consequences. So before we can get around these emotions, let's try to understand where they originate from. And I know for me personally, there are at least two different places, and I couldn't be far off if I were to guess that it's the same case for most other people. So first of all, it comes back to how I was conditioned as a young child. So I remember that when I was very young and I would express the fact that I was sad or upset, then everybody would come running to the rescue. And it doesn't take long for you as a child to put two and two together and realize that if you express those emotions, then you'll get what you want. You'll get some attention and you'll start to feel better. And although that kind of disappears as you grow older, there are still some remnants and some tendencies that remain. And so it's natural for us to feel in response to something that we don't want to do those same emotions, thinking subconsciously that it'll help us solve the problem, when in reality it won't. And the second sort of influencing factor was movies. So I've talked at length about that before, where you always see it in the movies where the main character is being depressed and dramatic in response to the conflict, and somehow in the end that ends up working out for him. So of course I believe that the same truth held in real life, but I was very wrong. So with that understanding, it's probably pretty obvious why that's wrong. And of course there are the particular consequences to each of those scenarios. So what happens if you don't get up and go to the gym? You're probably going to end up out of shape. What happens if you don't create distance between yourself and somebody that you're supposed to? You guys end up getting emotionally attached to each other, and it's 100 times harder when it all comes to a head and you have to part ways with each other than it would have been if you had just done the right thing to begin with. But also, just being sad and moping around all the time ruins your life. It ruins whatever experiences you're having, because there's so much to enjoy and have fun with in life that when you're older and you look back on your life and you realize that you were just sad the whole time, then you're going to regret that. And at that point, it's going to be too late. Now, in addition, usually the things that we end up complaining about are very trivial in comparison to what many people in the world really have to go through. So if you're worried about having to wake up early or break up with somebody or do some work or be uncomfortable for a few minutes, then really you're making something out of nothing. But perhaps most importantly, you have to understand that life does not care about you, and it never will. So no matter how much you beg and plead for mercy or leniency, life will never once say, okay, I feel sorry enough for you, so here's a free pass. So at that point, you're just spinning your wheels. So it follows naturally then that if ever you feel sad in the face of an obligation, don't succumb to those emotions and say something like, you know, I just can't take this anymore. I really would just have to see that person one last time or reach out to them one more time. Instead, as the title suggests, you have to be hard on yourself. So say something along the lines of, okay, you're sad, too bad. Life is tough. Life does not care about you, so you need to stop feeling sorry for yourself and get over it. Roll up your sleeves and get to work. And contrary to what you might be thinking, that isn't going to thrust you into some kind of depression. But instead, it can be incredibly empowering to go through something difficult and look around you and see that the walls aren't caving in and you're going to be fine. It's not really that big of a deal. Because now you know that if you can go through that, you can go through anything. So unfortunately, life is not always sunshine and roses. And the best response to an obstacle isn't to feel sorry for yourself, but rather to give yourself that swift kick in the ass, to open your eyes to reality and remind yourself that your emotions really aren't going to change anything. And you'll be surprised at how much more you can achieve with that attitude. So try it out, let me know how it works for you, and I'll see you next time.